So let's kick off and get rock and rolling. Thank you all so much for joining the webinar this afternoon. I'm Josh. I'm one of the team members here at Log My Care. We are a digital record system, one of the NHSX assured suppliers. We have been around for just over 7 years now, but we've always tried to keep a focus, whether that was from when the company was first started by our CEO and founder Sam to now when we are about 45 members of staff strong. We just try and make people's lives a little bit easier when they're providing and recording care. And one of the most stressful parts of providing care is getting ready for that dreaded CQC inspection. That's what we're going to be focusing on here today. I've got a absolutely fantastic speaker for everyone today. Louie is going to be our key guest speaker for today. Louie specializes in getting feedback from people, whether those be, service users, family members, staff members, the list goes on. And like Louie and I were talking earlier, we see the CQC putting more and more of an emphasis on people's voices, and having tools in place to make sure that you're ready or knowing how to gather information from people is incredibly important. Louie also does regular updates on CQC frameworks and, just like us, works all across the social care sector and, by the sounds of it, all across the country as well with his company Care Research. Does that pretty much sum it up, Louie?
That does it. I'm going to have to bring you to all of my talks to introduce me like that. That was brilliant. Thank you.
No, it's a pleasure. Thanks so much for joining us, Louie. It's a pleasure to have you. I'll let you get rock and rolling with all of the lovely information that you've got for these people.
Thank you, everyone. Yes, great to meet you all virtually. My name's Louie. I'm the Director of Care Research. We do a lot of work supporting services to understand the CQC framework and to help them with feedback for all people that they're supporting and connected with. But today we're going to be focusing in particular on CQC inspections, and these are the 3 things we are going to be covering. Number 1, a quick reminder of the CQC framework. I would like to say it's a surprise, but it isn't a surprise. A lot of us are still kind of grappling with bits and pieces of it. So we're just going to have a very quick overview to make sure we are all in the same boat. Then we're going to be looking at the 5 key changes to be aware of as we kick off 2025. And there are some interesting ones. And then finally, we're going to talk about some of the things you can do to be more prepared for your next CQC inspection. We are looking at this across the whole of the CQC space. So it's not particularly residential or DOM or learning disability. These are all universally relevant to everyone that is assessed by CQC within the adult social care space. So we're going to make sure that it's relevant for all of you here. So quick reminder, there are 34 quality statements. I know 99.9% of you will know that. There are 4 or 5 evidence categories. I'll explain why there's a difference in a moment. People's experiences, feedback from staff and leaders, feedback from partners, processes and observations. But if you are a home care service, you do not have observations. The reason, very simply being, can CQC barge into someone's house and look at what's going on? No, they can't. So those services have 4 evidence categories. There is a 1 to 4 scoring system. So quality statements and key questions are scored between 1 and 4. 1 is inadequate, 2 is requires improvement, 3 is good, and 4 is outstanding. And evidence is collected both on-site and remotely. And one of the big changes that a lot of people have experienced with the framework is that CQC are collecting evidence sometimes several weeks after that initial inspection visit. So that is my 10-second summary of the framework. Now, there are a few tweaks and changes coming down the pipeline. Here are the 5 main ones. I'm going into the detail on them in a moment, but just to let you know what they are. Number 1, we have no more evidence category scoring. If you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry, you will in a minute. CQC were scoring not just at quality statement level, but at the individual evidence categories underneath. That has been chucked in the bin. We'll explain why in a moment. Number 2, no more using old reports to create new scores. One of the things CQC did last year was, let's say you were assessed in 3 quality statements in SAFE, but your previous report, obviously, you're assessed as good in SAFE. They used to fill in those other quality statements with the old scores. They're not doing that anymore. We'll come back to what that means in a moment. Number 3, more sector-specific guidance. CQC wanted to kind of just give you the framework and that would be enough. But after a year of us kind of going on about it, and by us, I mean the sector, not us personally as care research, CQC realized, I think we need to listen. They want a bit more detail. They want a bit more sector-specific detail on how to reach these ratings. We'll talk about some of that guidance in a moment. The return of the inspector relationship. This was something that was instantly recognized as a deficit in the new framework. There are changes afoot to bring back closer named relationships between you and the inspector or inspectors that are likely to visit your service. And number 5, changes to the published reports. They are shorter, they are punchier. Is that good? Is that bad? We'll let you decide in a few slides' time. So those are the 5 changes. Let's jump into them in a bit more detail. Apologies that I'm talking super speedy, like I'm on the QVC shopping channel. We've just got a lot to get through. So hopefully, I know there's going to be a recording. So if I do speak a little bit too quickly, there will be a recording that you can use to go back and go, what did he say? Let's jump onto the first one. No more evidence category scores. Evidence will now be reviewed to create the quality statement using professional judgments. They used to score for each evidence category. So people's experiences, 1, 2, 3, or 4. Feedback from staff and leaders, 1, 2, 3, or 4. CQC have binned that for the very simple reason that it was taking far too long to give scores for every single evidence category for every quality statement. You do 34 times by 4 or 5, or up to 4 or 5, and obviously it becomes hundreds of individual evidence scores. So CQC are now going back to professional judgment. They'll still review the individual evidence categories. They'll then make a professional judgment to then give the quality statement. So that's, assessing needs, medicines optimization, et cetera. They'll give each of those 34 quality statements a score between 1 and 4 based on their professional judgment. And then those quality statement scores then aggregate to create the overall service score and the score for each key question. So you may have seen this in the past. This is kind of an example of what it looked like when they scored each evidence category. That is now gone. CQC are not going to be scoring every evidence category under each of those quality statements. Instead, what will happen is if you take something like caring, you will just get the scores for each quality statement. We've got an example here. You've got 3 for kindness, compassion, and dignity, 2 for treating people as individuals, etc. I'm sure you know how this works, but just to remind you, the way you get your key question score, what they do is they add those numbers up. So you can see you've got 14. The maximum score, if you've got 4, would have been 20. So you've got 14 out of 20. But year 7 maths, turn that into a percentage, 70%. If you look at this little table on the left, you can see that between 63 and 87% is a good. So you've scored a 3, a good for that key question of caring. They used to do it by building up the scores for each quality statement and so on and so forth. That is in the bin now. They're just using professional judgment to put a score against each quality statement. Number 2, again, we can have some conversations and questions later around what that means and the value or not, but just to kind of run through the core points. Number 2, no more using old reports to create new scores. So in December 2024, CQC officially stopped using old key question scores. What they used to do is, let's say that in a report in 2019, you got a good in safe, then all of those safe quality statements would be a 3 if they aren't inspected. CQC realized that actually a lot of services didn't like that, that it didn't really reflect truly where the services were at, that it was kind of a bit of a hodgepodge model, having new scores, but also old scores come together. So they have decided that they're instead, this is quite an interesting one, they are reviewing whether a minimum number of quality statements is required to score a key question. Now, here's what that means. Let's take something like SAFE. SAFE has 8 quality statements. One of the challenges CQC are trying to work out is how do we assess all of these services regularly? Maybe assessing 34 different areas for every single one is not feasible. Is there a minimum set? I'm just talking out loud in terms of the numbers here. Is there a minimum set? For example, there's 8 in SAFE, so there's a minimum 4 that we must always do in SAFE. Or there's 5 in caring. There's a minimum 2 or a minimum 3 that must be done in caring. CQC are trying to work out, okay, if we can't use the old scores and bring them into the new scores, how do we assess services without having to do all 34 quality statements every single time? And instead of using the old score model, because everyone hated it, to be blunt, they're looking through, is there a minimum number of quality statements we can require for each key question so that services are reasonably well assessed without us having to do the whole cycle of every quality statement every time we visit a service. Again, we'll have some interesting questions and thoughts on that, I'm sure, because it raises the wider question of what is an assessment? How deep does an assessment have to go for it to be valid? Number 3, this was quite funny, actually. Good old CQC managed to bury probably the most important document that they released in 2024 in an email they sent out on Halloween, which I thought was particularly apt, bless them. They promised more sector-specific guidance because everyone was saying, look, we know we've got the evidence categories, we know we've got quality statements, but what does that mean if I'm, a care service versus a dentist versus another type of service? What does that mean in terms of how do I actually get those ratings? And what CQC first created, and there was, if you go back to your email, Halloween, about 4 p.m., you will see within your CQC email a little blue part that says draft set of ratings characteristics. Now, it's not sector specific yet. There's still a sector specific piece to be done. But what it did do is it outlined in particular the details of what does good, what does outstanding, what does inadequate, what does RI look like for each key question. So safe, effective, caring, responsive, and well-led, and for each quality statement. Now, this is guidance, not framework. So this is not what must be done. This is what you could do is. So don't take this as kind of like, the eternal truth from above. This is essentially guidance to help you with the framework. Again, we'll be sending up a follow-up email and there'll be information on how to get hold of this and so on and so forth if you're not able to find it within your own emails. Just a little example of what we can see. Again, obviously, we're not going to read through all that to take up the rest of our time. But you can see, we've got a little example here. We've got the safe key question, and there's kind of a more detailed description of what outstanding, good, RI, and inadequate looks like. And again, you can see on the right, I've picked a particular quality statement. This is actually quite a short one. It's the only one I could take a full screenshot image of without it spreading over multiple pages. So a lot of them are longer than this. You can see we've got monitoring and improving outcomes, and it's got a description of what exceptional, so outstanding care looks like, a description of what good, a description of what RI or some shortfalls looks like, and a description of one significant shortfalls. So this is something that if you haven't seen it, again, it's not perfect, it's not finished, it's a draft, but it gives you an initial idea of where our CQC at in terms of how we reach outstanding, good, RI, inadequate in each of these areas, each of these quality statements, and in each of these key questions. There is more to be done on this. CQC is still yet to publish draft guidance per sector. And so there's some more detail and some more sector-specific guidance that, in theory, should be coming our way over the coming months. Obviously, CQC have a lot going on, so I'm not going to hold them to that timeline. But this is a good start to at least initially see where CQC position outstanding, good, RI, and adequate within each of these quality statements. Number 4, the return of the inspector relationship. Now, one of the things that CQC did quite early on with their framework was they wanted to move to kind of these regional hubs, and they were going to have sector-specific experts, and it was essentially a reorganization of the relationship between services and CQC. And in some ways, it was quite sophisticated and clever to have things based around the service type, to have people based around the region, which gave people more spread and so on and so forth. However, what quickly came to light was that services didn't know who to speak to. They didn't really like meeting random people at different inspections. If they had issues between inspections or issues that weren't related to inspections, they just didn't know who to go to. They didn't know who to speak to. They didn't know really where those questions should go, and they kind of just went into the ether. And obviously, we saw with one of the major reviews that CQC really struggled to keep on top of the sorts of messages that they received. So CQC have been piloting new relationship approaches, in particular introducing the idea of the named CQC contact. This is something that, again, is always 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We had those before the framework, and obviously before COVID, there was a lot more emphasis on the named contact and named inspector, and a lot of services spoke very highly of their CQC contact. There is a recognition by CQC that this needs to return. Again, in true kind of government organization ways, they are piloting things to make sure they don't get it wrong. They've done some NHS pilots. They're now moving those pilots into other sectors that CQC assess, including, of course, adult social care. There is a question mark over when. I cannot hand on heart say that the new inspector relationship approach will be in place at X. There is no specifics on when, but they recognize that this is important, this is required, and this is what the sector needs. There is, of course, a slight challenge here, and that CQC need to kind of recruit more people. They need more inspectors and so on and so forth. But there is a concerted, open acknowledgement that they need to return to that inspector relationship. So hopefully in time, we will see a movement with that particular needle, and you'll be able to have a named contact. Number 5, one of the ones that materialized slowly at the end of last year, and we will start to see a lot more of as assessments progress. One of the challenges that CQC have had is how long it takes to get a new report out. And it makes sense. What CQC were previously doing is they were writing up typically a paragraph or a couple of sentences for each evidence category for each quality statement. So if you had 20 quality statements being assessed and they were averaging 3 or 4 or even 5 evidence categories per one, again, you can see very quickly you get into hundreds of paragraphs of text, which is A, a nightmare for CQC inspectors. B, it means that your report is really, really, really late. And C, you know, my father's 77. Do I really have time to read, you know, hundreds of paragraphs about a care service? Is that best for me? And there's a big question we have to ask here. Who is CQC for? They are not actually primarily for you and your quality support. They are primarily for the public to understand and have a good understanding of the quality assurance of regulatory activities. And that has begged the question, well, why are we making these reports so long? Who are we doing all this extra work for? I'll show you what a new one looks like in a moment. But fundamentally, what we now have is we have the quality statement scores, which we've always had. We've had that, you know, throughout 2024. And now it's just followed by just a few sentences, as opposed to typically a paragraph or so for each evidence category. What I'm going to show you on the next slide are clips from 2 reports that were published pretty much the same day. I think one of them was published a day later than the other. One was using the old report style, and one was using the new report style that has this kind of condensed focus. So here is the old report style. You can see here we've got safe environments here. You've got a score of 3. You can see there are 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs. The first one is clearly about feedback from family members. The second one is clearly feedback from staff. The third paragraph is clearly about observations. You can see that we observed. And the fourth one is clearly about processes and audits and COSH and all this sort of thing. So that for just one quality statement, we can see there's about 278 words. There are 4 paragraphs. It's a lot of detail. Here is another report by a similar service. This published report was made literally a day or so after this one, but it was using the new report structure. Safe environments. Again, you can see a score, in this case 3, and we have a very, very simple 1, 2, 3, 4 sentence paragraphs, 88 words, less than a third of this report length. Again, I'm just going to read it very briefly. The service detected and controlled potential risks in the care environment. They made sure equipment, facilities, and technology supported the delivery of safe care. The provider completed both internal and external environmental risk assessments within people's homes during their initial assessment to check if it was safe for staff to carry out care in a safe environment. This includes checks around fire safety. A relative confirmed staff ensured the home environment was kept safe and free from hazards, especially before they left after the care visit had finished. That's it. We've got a pretty standard description of where they're at, and then a brief statement in relation to feedback. And actually, when you look at these reports that are coming out, these newer reports, that is typically the structure. We've got a brief kind of factoid description, a few, I'm going to say it, pretty generic sentences, and then 1 sentence or 2 sentences that focus on some form of feedback aspect. Why is CQC doing this? Very simply, this report was published 5 months after the inspection. This report was published 4 weeks after the inspection. This is all about timing. The critic in me, and I don't want CQC to, you know, break down my door and arrest me, but the critic in me would also say it's much harder to appeal this than this because there's more information here. I'm not saying that that's the why, not at all, but it is a side effect we have to be aware of. As these reports become more succinct, standardized, generic, that ability to kind of appeal them, to challenge them, reduces because, quite frankly, we have less to go on here. So I've given you a bit of an overview of the main changes. I hope you found that useful. But at the end of the day, what happens when that phone call happens, what happens when they turn up is still on you. These changes are things to be aware of, but what we want to talk about now is how we prepare for your next inspection assessment. 5 key points. We're going to go into those in a bit more detail in a moment. Number 1, we need to organize your evidence. Number 2, we need to focus on feedback. Number 3, we need to prepare your care staff. They are in this mess with you now. Number 4, we need to embrace technology. I'm not saying you have to buy everything and go all guns blazing, but technology is becoming more important as a result of how CQC have changed their assessment processes. And number 5, please don't panic. This is not, this is a shift, but it's not a transformation. This is a shift, not a transformation. So let's go through these, and then hopefully we'll have some time for questions too. I do hope everyone is enjoying might be a strong word. I hope you're getting a lot out of it, and I hope it's bringing you some value. Let's look at number 1, organizing your evidence. One of the really important things to highlight is what hasn't changed. So I've gone through, the reports are changing and inspector relationships and so on and so forth, and no more evidence level scoring, but there are still some fundamentals that are still in place and have been in place since day 1. Bear in mind, they were chucking information about this out as early as 2022. And some of these things have remained exactly the same. Quality statements, there's still 34 of them, they're still the same. Evidence categories, there's still 4 or 5 of them, they're still the same. 1 to 4 scoring, still the same. We still have those structures. So we need to make sure that as we organize, label, assess, audit our evidence, that we are firmly using this same structure. If you do not know, I'm not saying you have to memorize them, but if you are not embedding the quality statements in the ways that you label and assess and group evidence, you are missing a trick. If you are not aware of which evidence categories go for which quality statements, you are missing a trick. Get in touch with us. We can help you with all of that. If you are scoring things, and you're giving people 5 options or 2, you're missing a trick. Use these structures to organize, label, and group your evidence so that right, if they come for this quality statement, this is what we've got for each of the evidence categories. We have audited it internally and given them 3s or 4s, whatever it is. You want to speak the same language as the CQC inspector. A analogy I often use, so apologies if you've heard me say it 1 million times, if you've seen me on other talks. My beautiful wife is Turkish, which is lovely. One annoying thing, when I irritate her, which is quite a lot, she will have a go at me in Turkish because I don't speak Turkish, and it is impossible to argue with someone in a language that you do not speak. If CQC are turning up and they're looking at quality statements and evidence categories and 1 to 4 scoring, and you're chucking out random bits of emails and, oh, this is safe, and oh, this is we gave people 7 answer options here. Can you see how it gets very hard to make the connection? So organize your evidence using these structures. Try and centralize and digitize these things. OneDrive, Teams, these are really good ways of centralizing information. Obviously, wonderful platforms like LogMyCare have all kinds of fabulous things built in as well to organize and label and store evidence. But you do want to make sure that it's centralized, that it's digitized, and that you keep it safe. One of the reasons why you want to do that as well is because if you're living up in Ibiza, having a lovely holiday, and CQC rock up, you don't want to be spending your summer trip trying to talk someone through finding a particular folder or finding a particular document. You want to know that the right people have access. It's organized against the framework. So if you're not there, you know that basically anyone that's able to read will be able to lead them through the evidences that you've stored because you've labeled them, you've stored them, you've organized them against the framework. You've done 95% of the work already. Number 2, focus on feedback. Now, of course, I would say that because it's a big part of what we do at Care Research, but we're going to explain the detail and the data in a moment. Put simply, you cannot gain or maintain a good or outstanding without feedback, without doing feedback well. The focus on the framework has shifted massively. In the old framework, it was the inspection day, judgment day, everything is hinged on this particular day and this person that walked through the door. We'll show you in a moment, the data shows that the setup of the new framework actually makes feedback more important than the observation visit. If you don't believe me, here is the proof. I know we've got a whole range of wonderful services, so I've given you both data sets here. You've got care homes and supported living on the left, and you've got home care and shared lives on the right. What we can see here is there are 34 quality statements, okay? 26 out of those 34 need people's experience evidence. That's residents, families, people receiving care. Feedback from staff and leaders is in place for all 34. Every single quality statement needs feedback from staff and leaders. And then feedback from professional partners is 5 or 6, dependent upon specifics for your sector. By contrast, observation for care homes, only 11 out of those 34 quality statements require an observation. And if you're home care or shared lives, observation isn't even evidence category, it's 0. And then processes, as you would expect, 31 out of the 34. When you actually do the maths on this, those 3 feedback evidences take up 63% of the evidence CQC can collect. Observation, on the other hand, about 11%, about 12%. So there's a real shift whereby simply, if you get amazing observations, but your scores for those feedbacks are wrong, it's going to impact on your rating, because the inspector is not just going to think about what they looked at. They're going to use what people have said, residents, families, staff, partners, to come up with that quality statement judgment. So if you haven't got good feedback, or if CQC have had to depend upon the 2 or 3 people they happen to speak to, you are playing a risky game. So what does this mean? CQC will probably speak to a handful of people. Typically, they will call staff members, they'll speak to residents or people you're supporting and families where at all possible, but it will be a small number. We spoke to a service once, they cared for something like 108 people. And CQC says, oh, we got a really good response rate. We spoke to a really good number of people. That number was 9. 9 out of 108 potential people was considered a good response rate. Now, that was one specific service, one specific inspector. Things may have changed, things may be different. But what I'm trying to point out here is they are not going to be speaking to 50% of your residents or 50% of your family or 50% of your staff. They're going to be speaking to a very small portion. And if you don't have alternative, additional, it's not about silencing people, it's about giving people more feedback to process. If you are exclusively dependent upon the people CQC happen to speak to, you're playing a dangerous game, because they might speak to 3 people and one of them might absolutely kick off. And if that's 1 out of 3 people, well, that's a very heavy voice. If it's 1 out of 30 bits of feedback from 30 people, it doesn't silence that person. It doesn't mean that what they're saying isn't true, or isn't relevant, or isn't accurate. It contextualizes. And that's what we need to think about feedback. It's not about silencing people. It's the exact opposite, getting as much feedback as possible so that CQC have a wider set to make their assessment on, not just the 2 or 3 who they happen to speak to or who happen to volunteer to speak. Again, I'm going to very briefly talk about surveys, just because it's something that we do, and we've worked with hundreds of services now to use surveys to help with this CQC feedback kind of process. One of the great things about surveys is that you can get a large amount of data at one time. If CQC are going to be doing in-depth phone calls with 2 or 3 people, that's great. But you also want to get that widespread to go, how can we show the views of 30 of our family members and people we support? So it's a really good way to use surveys well, because if you do them well, you're going to have additional data to share with CQC. Really important thing, how to structure your surveys. This is what we do, but we are giving you for free our tips on how to do it if you wish to do it yourself. You've got these 3 evidence categories: people's experience, feedback from staff and leaders, feedback from partners. These very clearly split into 3 different types of surveys. People's experiences, that's your resident and family survey. Feedback from staff and leaders, well, that's going to be your staff survey. And feedback from partners, that's going to be your partner survey. So we need to do 3 different types of survey. The next thing, and this is kind of the magic, we often think of surveys as an evidence category, but CQC are looking at each quality statement, aren't they? So what we need to think about is each quality statement being its own evidence. And the best way to do that is to make sure that each question is focused on one specific quality statement. And then the next level thing is to give people 4 answer options, not 5, not 3, not 7, 4. Because if CQC are rating you between 1 and 4, then we want to copy that. So typically we would do something like a question like, staff are kind and compassionate towards me. That's the quality statement: kindness, compassion, and dignity. And then we have 4 answer options. Strongly agree is 4 points, agree is 3, disagree is 2, strongly disagree is 1. So guess what we can do very easily? You get 20 responses, you can create an average score. So 20 residents and families answer this question. Overall, our score is 3.4. Our residents scored us a good for this quality statement. It's not something that we as care research are saying unto them. It's not something you're saying as an independent, as a service manager. You're not declaring this. Your own residents, your own family members, your own staff are scoring you between 1 and 4 for each of these quality statement questions. Just a little aside, we do a lot of accessibility work as well, where typically we'd give people 2 answer options, and perhaps the smiley face is worth 4 points and the sad face is worth 1 point. There are ways that you can ensure that people that perhaps might not be able to do 4 answer options can still contribute. But can you see what we're doing here? We're making our surveys, we're making our survey questions, we're making our survey scoring create the evidence that we need, create the scores, create the quality statement scores, not from Care Research's mouth, not from your mouth, but directly from the mouths of the individuals that we're supporting, families, staff, professional partners. We have a fabulous survey platform that we are just doing the last bits of work on. Again, happy to tell people more about that if they'd like, if they've got big quality teams and they'd like to kind of do the Care Research job, but do it themselves internally. The outputs that we create, I'll go to those in a moment. We do a lot of accessible surveys. We have Makaton surveys, we have PEC surveys, and that's I think I'm wearing the same shirt. Oh, look at that. I didn't do that this morning. I just want to make that abundantly clear. But we also have video record questions. So some individuals we know can't type an answer, and scribing an answer for them just feels wrong, doesn't it? So we give them the opportunity to video record an answer. Obviously, we can't play the videos of those individuals here. So I have just got an example still image there of one of the videos that we've done. And ironically, I am wearing the same shirt. I'd like to make it abundantly clear, I do own more than one shirt. This is purely a coincidence. But it is a really important point. If you are supporting individuals with learning disabilities or communication needs, you know that CQC probably won't be able to get feedback from them. But that is not a reason to not have their voice heard. In fact, the opposite. If you can show that you are having accessible means and getting those voices, getting the videos of those individuals, showing CQC the PEC surveys that you're doing or the Macron surveys, you are showing that you value their feedback and you are giving CQC feedback that they have no choice but to trust, because they themselves don't have the facilities, the tools to gain feedback from individuals that have communication needs. Very quick overview. These are the documents that we produce for our clients. As you can see, you've got the question, you've got the quality statement information, you've got the score and the rating, you've got the full data. There's usually a description, so it might be resident scored 3.2, family scored 3.1, or registered nurses scored 3.2, healthcare assistant scored 3.4. We've got the comments that people are leaving. We typically give people opportunities to make comments after each question. So if they select a positive answer, what's going well? They select a negative answer, what can we do better? And we're using all that data to give CQC a really clear one-pager. Here is what our relatives and people we support rate us for this quality statement. Here's what our staff, that would be a different document, rate us for this quality statement. Here's the comments that they are leaving. Here's the scores between the different residents and families, or between the different staff types. It's about giving CQC feedback that they can process. If you forward them 60 emails, guess what? They're not going to look at them. If you forward something like this, they're going to take note, and you're doing the thinking for them. You're saying, look, our residents, our families rate us a good in this area. Doesn't mean CQC are just going to roll over and accept it, but it means that you're planting the seed and you're making it clear and easy for them to make their decisions. Again, we also provide data and comments and all these sorts of things. Last little bit, I'm going to do a quick power, couple of minutes, and then we're going to have some time for questions. You need to prepare your care staff. Every one of those 34 quality statements has feedback from staff and leaders as a potential evidence category. We've seen staff called up on their phones for an hour and a half, sometimes in evenings, sometimes in weekends, sometimes on personal phone numbers, sometimes it's random. There was one service, they had a meeting after their CQC inspection. They realized that all of the staff that were called had a last name beginning with the letter B. So clearly the inspector just went top to bottom and just phoned the first 10 or 15 at the top. We've also seen emails that have got over 25 separate questions sent to staff. Again, the right or wrong of this is a bigger question, but fundamentally, we need to make sure our staff are ready to speak with CQC. Few things we need to do before they get the call. Number one, they need to know that it's possible. You don't want to be in a situation where CQC have arrived, they're phoning up people that evening, and your staff don't even know what this is all about. Number two, you want to tell them which quality statements they are exploring, assessing. Number three, we want them to have a broad understanding of the framework and their place in it. So they understand what this is all about. And number four, this is a really important part. We want them to practice answering CQC questions, preferably out loud, because the bit of your brain that thinks in its own head and the bit of your brain that speaks out loud are different. It's why sometimes you can think something and then just garbage comes out of your mouth. So we need to give people space to practice answering CQC questions. It's something we need to facilitate as services. Again, something I'm happy to send through. We're going to do some chase up, some follow up emails and some documents and so on after this. We have a really useful document that's quite useful to use. Each of the quality statements, and then we're asking staff 3 things: my experiences, what's going well, any improvements. That is a great way to get staff to start thinking about these quality statements. Another thing, I'm just going to, again, we'll send some more information about it. We do have kind of a video course or a set of videos to help staff understand the framework called Care Staff Confidence, how to speak to a CQC inspector, helps them understand the framework, helps them go through the practicalities of, what do I do if I don't understand the question? What do I do if I have to give negative feedback? And it's got lots of additional resources, practice tasks, 200 practice CQC questions written by a real inspector. It's a way that you can have those resources to have those conversations, have those practices, have those one-to-ones with staff. And again, we'll send some more information about that. There's a picture of me. As you can see, I clearly own more than one shirt because there I am in a different one. But again, it's a useful tool just to help services have that bank of resources to kind of train and support staff with answering questions and going through that process. Number 4, we're running out of time, but we're going to get there. Embrace technology. One of the things about the new framework that's happened almost by accident is it's emphasized the importance of technology. Effective oversight. You've got all these quality statements, all these evidence categories. Technology will enable you to have that oversight. Quick data sharing. CQC are requesting data and information often several weeks after the visit and all remotely. So you need to get that onto someone's screen. Now, either you have to find someone and chain them to the photocopier and scanner, or you make sure that all your evidences are already digitized and able to share. Secure storage. Again, we need to make sure that our data is safe, is secure, and the digital space, if we use it well, does that. Finally, the volume of information. We are not looking at, one ring binder now. We've got a lot of quality statements, a lot of evidence categories, and therefore a lot of info. So we need to make sure that we are using technology so that we have it stored, ready to share, labeled, and easy. You do not want to spend, weeks during that inspection trying to find stuff. You want to have some folders ready. You've got them labeled, you've got your quality statements, you've got your evidence categories, you've got your evidence there. So when CQC sends us this, send us this, send us this, click, send. Rather than, oh my goodness, well, that's the weekend ruin because I've got to go into the office and find documents and scan them. And, you don't want that. No one wants that. So we need to think about the value of technology in facilitating this process. It doesn't mean you have to go out and buy everything and get every piece of technology out there. It does mean we need to have a digital plan. It does mean we need to start thinking about ensuring our technology is what we need, that it kind of meets our needs from a quality perspective, but also that it meets our needs from a data and from an evidence perspective. Just a quick one. And obviously, I have no specific allegiances, but obviously we're here at Log My Cares, and I must say, good stuff. Few things to think through when you're thinking about systems. Supplier brand and size. Size isn't everything. Make sure that you're using something that works for you. Does it meet your specific needs? What's the usability? What's the training? What's the interoperability? Again, it's very tricky to see how platforms might link to one another, but there are some great examples of that. Customer testimonials, reviews. It's a really important thing to get an idea of what current clients, current customers are saying about the tech. Fail fast. This is a really important one. You might have a piece of software already, and you're sitting there going, this isn't really working for us. Maybe Log My Care might be a better fit. You need to fail fast. The biggest expense is not buying a second piece of tech. It's staying with the wrong one. Staying with the wrong one will cost you in terms of training, in terms of quality, in terms of staff retention. Having the right tech is important. And if you know you have the wrong one, fail fast and go and find the right one, or work with others to find the right one. A little shout out to Guided Innovation, a group that we've done a lot of work with, who support services around that process, and who I know for a fact are very, very, very pro Log My Care as well. They've been very positive about them and the software they present. Number 5, and it is an important one, don't panic. The fundamentals of care are staying the same. The fundamental regulations are staying the same. What is changing is how you collect and assess your information. So I'm going to I'm going to ask you 3 questions. If you or your staff don't fully understand the CQC framework, get in touch. We can do a training day for you. If you feel your staff, if they had a phone call tomorrow from CQC, they would absolutely panic and all become a mess, get in touch. We can help you. If you are looking at your feedback surveys going, oh, we haven't actually done one, or oh, it was a paper survey, or oh, it was a nightmare and it took me months and months and blah, 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 get in touch. If you don't understand the framework, we have training for you. If your staff aren't ready to speak to CQC, we have some training and some resources for you. If you know that your feedback surveys are nowhere near as good as they need to be in view of CQC's kind of focus, get in touch. We can support you. There's my lovely face, again, with a 3rd shirt. So we're upping the level of shirts that I clearly now own. Really easy to email us. It's literally the same word, research@careresearch.co.uk. We've got our website. I'm on LinkedIn as well. And I will be sending something through to Log My Care to share out with others as well. Please do get in touch. If you're sitting there going, oh my goodness, I've just realized what I need to do, don't panic. We've helped hundreds of services with all of these sorts of problems. And we can help you too. That's enough of my little spiel. I hope that was useful.
I was about to say, Louie, take a breath. That was absolutely incredible.
Bless you. Thank you.
I've had it matches my shirt, my pink Log My Care notebook next to me. That was absolutely fabulous. Look, I thought I was pretty kind of keyed up on how to prepare for a CQC inspection, but I feel like I've had my mind blown. Thank you so much. That session was incredibly action-packed with so much great information. And I think everyone in the chat watching along at home agreed. We've got a couple of questions for you. We are going to run over slightly by just a couple of minutes.
Sorry, everyone.
But loads of people in the chat saying thank you and asking to make sure that the slides or there's a recording available so you can refer back to it, because I think this is something near and dear to everyone's heart. We had some questions around changes to CQC frameworks and like where to get the most up-to-date information. Are there any kind of key channels that you go to look to just to make sure that you're always up to date?
So I'll tell you one, and so CQC, I have said before, whoever the CQC comms department is needs to have a big, strong look at themselves because the comms haven't been very forthcoming. What I would say is when you get an email from CQC, I know it's very tempting to go, but do read it and click on any links, because often what they have is they'll have a link to somewhere on a website that you wouldn't find any other way. So that draft document, that was literally buried as a bit of text within kind of an open paragraph. But what you got from it was a 68-page document on what to do for your service. So it's one of those weird things where you go back to the emails. If you get an email, read through it slowly, click any of the links they point out, because sometimes there's some really important information hidden in there. CQC themselves, they do have a news section. It's quite broad and generalized. We, as Care Research, we do quite a lot of posts. So if you connect with us on LinkedIn, we do quite a lot. We do the boring work of going through the emails, and we do often like promote and share things that have come out. I will say they've gone quite quiet. They have gone purposefully quiet because with Julian, who I've heard excellent things about, to be fair, they are doing a massive inward piece of work, initially focusing on how do we treat services better. So they have gone a bit quiet this last month or so. I think they're kind of sorting their own ship out before they start sending out more updates. So check the emails, review every link that's in there, connect with us. We do quite a lot of work on updates when it's relevant. Nice.
Thank you for that advice, Louie. A jokey question from Alan. He asked if you're a lumberjack part-time, because we've seen a flannel shirt a couple of times.
Well, I'll tell you what, my upper body strength is not that much greater than my 5-year-old daughter's. So, fun fact, I lived with the Amish for 2 days. That is 100% true. I did a weird little, let's see what this is like. And they did wood chopping, and it was one of the worst days of my life. No, it's not my backup plan.
Confirmed, not a lumberjack, more of a care expert than anything else, is what I've understood. And then just one last one for you, Louie. Not a question, just I thought it was a great point by Kay, just making a point of you making sure that everyone with accessibility needs can access surveys, that no one is left out. So yeah, massive kudos from me personally as well there.
Thank you. I think it's important. At the end of the day, when it comes to people's voices, the people we often most need to hear from are the ones where it's a little bit more difficult. And I think we're at a point now, not just because of CQC, but just from a humanity perspective, we need to use the tech that's available to, we don't have, it's not 1986 anymore. There isn't an excuse, and we need to operationalize and ensure everyone's being heard. Even if it's a bit of extra effort, even if it's a bit more hard work, it's important, it's valuable, and really it's a human right as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, we were talking about that before we went on, so definitely hard agree with that. No more questions from the chat, but if anyone's got a last minute one, please feel free to drop it in there. A couple of people did have some questions about Log My Care, though, which is something, if you can't tell by the t-shirt and the notepad, do love talking about. Log My Care also can be really helpful in preparing for CQC inspections. We don't do the same job that Louie does in terms of speaking to members of staff, family members, partners, but we focus more on the care record side in getting ready for those inspections. We try to make sure it's not all left to the last minute. So we also try and make sure that all of your care records are accurate before the CQC even come knocking, whether that's through alerts on anything like missed items of care or out-of-date care plans. But once the CQC do come knocking, we try and make reporting to them as easy as possible. And, that's not just in person, like Louie brought up, with them asking for more information remotely, saving time and just being able to click that download button and email them back that PDF without having to think too much about it is significantly easier than sitting by the photocopier for God knows how long, depending on how much information they ask for. Louie's also spoken a lot about involving your service users and capturing their opinions. Although we don't do those surveys, we do try and keep the service user at the heart of their records, whether that be through focusing on allowing them to record their own care, changing perspective of logs. So instead of, this carer looks after this person, it's I was able to do this activity, and that's recorded in their care records, or having that service user sign their own care plans to say that they've been involved in making them. We also enable evidencing of goal setting, which can be incredibly important when dealing with younger service users looking to grow more. And like I said earlier, just seamlessly downloading every single piece of information from that download center and not having to go searching for that piece of paper that you swore you put in the filing cupboard 3 months ago will hopefully make everyone's lives a little bit easier. So just another way that we try and help out making everyone's lives a little bit easier and de-stressing that CQC inspection, something that Louie spoke about, and I absolutely love that it was in there as one of your kind of key 5 points.
Thank you.
There has already been a poll in the chat. If you're keen to learn more about Log My Care, you can go to the link on screen, or you hopefully will have a little pop-up now enabling you to book a meeting with a member of the team, like myself or one of my colleagues. These are typically 30-minute to an hour sessions. We'll chat to you, try and understand your service, and hopefully be able to help you understand how Log My Care can solve the care record challenges that you are facing. So please go ahead and click that button now, or reach out on the website. There's you can't miss it. It's a massive button on the website where you can click to book a demo. And yeah, thank you all so much for coming. I know loads of people have asked about getting a recording of this, and the slides will have both, as well as some great information about how to get in touch with Louie and his services, or just to get some advice, just to say hi. I know that I will afterwards. You can reach both of us on LinkedIn, and we'll have all of those good details. Any kind of parting messages other than don't panic, Louie?
Yeah, I think don't panic, don't ignore. That's the most important thing. It's not, you don't do, there's two extremes here. Don't do either of those. Stay in the middle, start to get things in place.
Absolutely. Yeah, you unfortunately can't ignore that CQC inspection, but getting a little bit more prepared for it will hopefully make lives a little bit better. Absolutely. Okay. No more questions in the chat, and we have run over just a little bit, but that's okay, I think. Thank you all so much for joining. Have a fabulous rest of your days. Good luck with the rest of your travels, Louie. Are you back home? You back home tonight, or?
I'll be back. No, I'll be back home on Friday.
Oh God, look after yourself.
Yes. Got some more shirts as well, so that's going to be good.
Okay.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for the invite. Thank you for the opportunity.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining, Louie, and thanks everyone else for watching online. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.